Okay, let's just jump right into this. We're doing a deep dive on a film that I think for most of us lives in our memory as this charming, kind of quirky Jim Carrey movie from the late 90s.
A light satire.
Exactly. A feel-good story about a guy finding his freedom. And that is the soft, comforting memory we all have of The Truman Show.
But if you actually sit down and watch it today,
Mm.
it is not a comedy. When you strip away that layer of nostalgia, you see its real structure. It's a profound piece of psychological horror.
It really is.
It's not just a film about surveillance. It's a film about systematic, calculated, lifelong torture.
Absolutely. Everyone remembers this as a funny Jim Carrey movie. But if you watch it today, it's a psychological horror film about torture. It almost feels like a documentary on the mechanics of cruelty, a blueprint for psychological abuse.
And that realization is, well, it's the core of what we're looking at today. Our mission here is a total deconstruction based on this report, The Panoptic Soul.
A fantastic read.
It really is. And it positions the film not as a satire, but as an existential dystopia. We're going to dissect the four foundational layers of trauma in the film.
Right.
There's the psychological gaslighting that just annihilates the self.
Yeah.
Then you have the theological tyranny from Christof.
Mm-hmm.
Then the complicity of the audience. And finally, the most disturbing part, the prophetic inversion that we are all right now living through.
And that's the thesis, isn't it? The dark heart of this deep dive is that The Truman Show is the ultimate allegory for the commodification of the human soul. It's the slow surgical extraction of what the report calls behavioral surplus. Every fear, every genuine reaction, every single piece of sorrow for the entertainment of a global panopticon.
An empire built on one man's soul.
A multi-billion-dollar empire built off one man's genuine unscripted existence. And terrifyingly, we are all implicated in that. To really feel the horror of it, I think you have to start not with the cameras, but with Truman's mind. What Christof built, it wasn't just a television set. It was a finely tuned weapon pointed directly at his psyche.
It was a sophisticated, contained torture chamber, designed to keep him in a perpetual state of instability. The core horror is that Truman Burbank lives in a world that is, for him, functionally solipsistic. He is the true man, but his entire reality is purely contingent on external architects.
His world only exists for him.
Exactly. And his subjective experience is completely irrelevant the moment it threatens the commercial narrative.
And this isn't just a philosophical idea anymore, is it? The film has actually entered clinical reality. The report talks about the Truman Show delusion, or TSD. I think for a lot of you listening, that might be a shocking realization.
Oh, it is. TSD is a recognized, clinically identified persecutory delusion. Patients genuinely believe their lives are staged reality shows, that they're being controlled by unseen directors.
The horrible irony being that for Truman.
For Truman, the delusion is the absolute truth. He is the one patient for whom paranoia is the only rational, survival-oriented response to his environment.
He's trapped in a paranoid system that is constantly proving his worst fears right.
And it gets even deeper than just paranoia. It's what the report calls the inversion of reference.
Okay, break that down.
Well, in a typical delusion of reference, a patient mistakenly believes that completely unrelated events are about them. A song on the radio, a news report.
They think it's a secret message for them.
Precisely. But for Truman, every seemingly unrelated event is actually about him. Think about those glitches. That huge studio spotlight, labeled with the name of a star, Sirius, literally crashes from the sky.
Or the rain. The localized rain cloud that just follows him.
Exactly. It follows him around his garden while the rest of the street is bone dry. Or the radio frequency that suddenly picks up the control room dialogue.
Yeah.
These are not hallucinations. That's the crucial point. They're empirical, observable glitches in the matrix designed to contain him.
So when you or I see a coincidence, we dismiss it. When Truman sees one, it's terrifying proof that he's in prison. It validates that deep, gnawing fear that he's not a participant in reality, but just an object being observed.
Exactly. And these constant systematic invalidations, they perfectly illustrate the psychological theory of already laying on ontological insecurity.
Which means
It just means lacking a secure, fundamental sense of your own existence. Truman cannot trust his own senses, his own memories, or the people closest to him. Sea Haven is what Lang would call a schizophrenogenic system.
meaning it's designed to create psychosis.
Explicitly engineered to do so. It invalidates his perceptions the moment they threaten the show's narrative integrity. The entire town is, therefore, one massive, collective gaslighting apparatus.
They don't just lie to him, they enforce a false reality through a conspiracy of the majority. I mean, that scene where he sees his dead father dressed as a homeless man trying to get to him.
That scene is a perfect microcosm of the whole machine. The system immediately swarms in. Actors physically remove the evidence of truth, forcing him to rely on the validation of paid employees to define what is real.
They don't just tell him he's wrong, they erase the proof.
They erase his reality. It ensures the psychological devastation is profound. Truman is denied the basic human right to a private internal life.
And you see it break him down. I mean, even his most private memories, his traumas, they're all manufactured flashbacks that the control room plays to reinforce his conditioning.
Which leads directly to a state of depersonalization. He starts to feel like a spectator in his own body, because he is. His internal life is scripted by these external forces. It is total systemic control of his consciousness.
If the town is the prison wall, then Meryl. Meryl is the razor wire woven into his bed sheets. We have to spend some real time on Meryl, who's actually an actress named Hannah Gill. She represents the total destruction of Sanctuary.
Meryl is, without question, the most intimate and therefore the most damaging vector of psychological abuse in the entire film. She takes the sanctity of a marriage, that foundational human bond built on trust, and turns it into a calculated corporate transaction.
She is not a wife.
She's an employee managing a multi-million-dollar asset who just happens to sleep next to her. It is a profound violation of domestic trust. Her performance is 24/7 psychological warfare.
And that brings us to the scene that defines the whole film's genre as horror. The Coco scene.
Yes, that's the moment where the system's priorities are just laid completely bare. Truman is spiraling. He's in genuine existential terror. His reality is crumbling in his own kitchen.
He's having a real Meryl argument with the highest possible emotional stakes.
Stakes that Meryl as Hannah cannot actually feel, so she breaks character. But she doesn't do it to comfort him, or even to really fight with him. She pivots mid-argument, turns to the hidden camera, and delivers a scripted advertisement.
With this manic, hollow cheerfulness.
Why don't you let me fix you some of this new mococo drink? All natural cocoa beans from the upper slopes of Mount Nicaragua. The camera zooms right in on the product. It's just grotesque.
It's textbook psychological abuse, but with a corporate sponsor's smile. By injecting commerce into a moment of pure, raw vulnerability, she invalidates his deepest emotions. She signals brutally that his pain, his sanity, his existential fear, it's all completely secondary to the show's economic needs.
She literally tells him he's crazy, that he needs help, while simultaneously doing something that confirms his worst fears. That nothing is real, that his entire life is an economy. The home, the one place that should be a safe harbor, is exposed as a stage.
And this is the mandatory question we have to grapple with, the real gut punch of that scene. Imagine your wife interrupting a fight to sell you cocoa. That isn't capitalism, that's a nightmare. The wife is a corporate agent, the marriage is just a commercial.
And her eventual breakdown in the car confirms it. When Truman finally pushes her too far, she doesn't cry for him, she panics for herself. She screams, "Do something!" at the hidden crew. She's not a wife afraid of her husband. She is an employee terrified of an unruly asset. She fears for her contract, not for his sanity. It just lays bare the transactional nature of their entire love story.
So if Meryl corrupts the romantic bond, Marlon, his best friend, just annihilates the fraternal bond. That feels even colder to me because he uses their shared fabricated childhood as leverage.
Marlon is, psychologically speaking, the most insidious agent in the whole system. He leverages what Truman believes is genuine affection and history to keep him enslaved. This gets into what the report calls the non-player character phenomenon, or NPCs.
Which is exactly what they are. They're like characters in a video game.
They have their loops, their limited dialogue trees, their precise paths, all to simulate an organic community. Truman's horror really begins when he starts to notice the mechanical precision of these loops.
That dented beetle that drives by at the same time every day, the lady on the bike.
That uncanny, unnatural regularity, it plunges him into a state of derealization. It actually mirrors clinical schizophrenia, where the brain detects what it perceives as hyperpatterns and assumes a grand conspiracy.
But for Truman, the conspiracy is real.
Exactly. The extras aren't people. They're mobile scenery. Their cheerful good morning isn't a greeting. It's a compliance check.
And Marlon is the anchor of that normalcy, the bridge scene. It's just a masterclass in technologically mediated emotional abuse.
It's the complete annihilation of trust. Truman is on this unfinished bridge, a perfect symbol for his stalled quest for freedom, and he's pouring his heart out to his quote-unquote best friend.
And Marlon's response is entirely synthetic.
It's a meticulous lie, fed to him line by line through an earpiece, directly from Christof. He looks Truman in the eye and says, "The last thing I would ever do is lie to you," while literally speaking a lie dictated by his director.
He's just a human repeater for divine commands.
He is. And he may believe he's helping Truman, a sort of benevolent brainwashing. But the effect is absolute betrayal.
Which brings us back to that chilling solipsistic question. Does Truman have friends or just handlers?
The answer is clearly handlers. Marlon's technically mediated connection is a terrifying foreshadowing of how modern digital communication can interfere with real empathy. It's a performative friendship designed to validate a false reality. His betrayal is absolute.
Okay, so we've established the psychological horror of the environment. Now we have to zoom out and look at the source of that tyranny. Christof, the creator, the architect, the false god of Sea Haven. The power dynamic here feels explicitly theological.
To really grasp the magnitude of Christof's arrogance, you have to look at it through the lens of Gnostic theology.
Yay!
Now, for anyone unfamiliar, Gnosticism basically posits that the material world is a flawed, deceptive prison. It was created by an arrogant, lesser god, the Demiurge, who traps human souls to keep them ignorant of the true, transcendent reality.
And Christof is the cinematic Demiurge. It's not subtle at all.
His name, Christof, suggests a kind of counterfeit messiah. He operates from a control room in the artificial sky, a lunar panopticon. He literally controls the sun, the weather, the fate of every person in his world.
And Sea Haven is the Gnostic prison. It's beautiful, but it's fundamentally false, designed to keep Truman ignorant of the truth that lies just beyond the dome.
And Christof's own defense of this is the classic demiurgic claim. When he's confronted, he says, "I have given Truman the chance to lead a normal life. The world, the place you live in, is the sick place."
He's defending the prison as paradise. He's saying knowledge is dangerous.
Exactly. And so Truman's entire journey becomes a Gnostic ascent. He has to pierce the firmament, that painted skywall, to escape the false reality and achieve gnosis, or true knowledge.
The symbolism is so strong there. The falling spotlight is labeled Sirius, a star associated with higher knowledge. And his final climb up those stairs, it's a metaphysical breakout.
It's a spiritual quest disguised as a physical escape. But beyond the theology, there's a deeply disturbing personal pathology in Christof's actions. His relationship with Truman isn't just about control, it's possessive paternalism. He confuses total ownership with love.
You see it in that one scene, which is maybe the creepiest in the whole film.
When he strokes the giant screen while Truman is sleeping.
Yes. It's this grotesque, awful intimacy. It signifies total possession of Truman's body, his image, his dreams. He genuinely believes he's Truman's parent.
And that belief drove him to systematically remove Truman's actual father with that staged drowning. He had to install himself as the sole patriarchal authority, which also allowed him to infantilize Truman.
The whole 1950s aesthetic, it keeps him trapped in this safe, idealized childhood. It arrests his development.
And that drowning is the key piece of evidence for explicit psychological abuse. It was trauma inflicted for the purpose of confinement. The producers deliberately engineered this event to induce a crippling hydrophobia.
So it wasn't just a dramatic exit for an actor, it was targeted behavioral conditioning.
Of the cruelest order. It's basically the Ludovico technique from Clockwork Orange. They manufactured a severe phobia in him to keep him geographically contained. It's a stunning act of scientific cruelty.
And when Truman finally rebels against that conditioning, Christof's response is just terrifying. It's not disappointment, it's pure vengeful wrath.
He almost drowns Truman in that artificial storm. He's screaming, "Is that the best you can do?" at his own creation. The arrogance is absolute. He's a false god, facing a creation that suddenly develops free will.
He'd rather kill Truman on live TV than let him be free.
Which exposes the truly possessive, pathologically selfish nature of his love. It was always conditional on Truman remaining his property.
So how does he maintain that day-to-day control? It's the ultimate technological panopticon, isn't it?
It is. We have to look at Foucault here and his analysis of the panopticon prison. The idea is the prisoner knows they could be watched at any moment, so they start policing themselves. Christof's lunar room is the central tower. Truman is the inmate.
But the key violation is that Truman doesn't know he's being watched, not at first. The control is completely external.
Right. And that external control allows Christof to use Sea Haven as a massive behavioral Skinner box. It's a closed environment where behavior is scientifically shaped through reinforcement.
So what's the positive reinforcement?
The perfect life, the nice house, the loving wife, the safe community.
And the negative.
The terrifying storms, the death of his father, the constant gaslighting. All of it is designed to reduce a complex human being to a set of predictable, conditioned reflexes. That predictability maximizes viewer engagement and, crucially, advertiser profit.
And yet, he breaks free. The man rebels.
And that's the hopeful Gnostic counterpoint of the film. It proves that no amount of material comfort or behavioral conditioning can suppress that deeper, unquenchable desire for truth. The report calls it the divine spark.
The soul's need for real knowledge.
Christof is the ultimate materialist. He believes a perfect material world will suppress the spiritual quest. Truman's rebellion proves that a system built on conditioning and commerce is fundamentally flawed because it fails to account for the unscripted human spirit.
But the ultimate horror, I think, is that Christof couldn't exist without an audience. The psychological torture, the theological tyranny, it's all funded and morally licensed by millions of viewers.
This is where the report forces us to look in the mirror. Christof is the architect, yes, but the audience members are the complicit jailers. The viewers of The Truman Show, the people in the bar, the man in the bathtub, they are not passive observers.
No, they are active enablers of an ethical atrocity. The voyeurism is the engine that runs the whole machine, and they seem totally disconnected from the consequences of their consumption.
It's the banality of their evil. They've normalized the consumption of one man's involuntary servitude. The bathtub man is the perfect symbol of this grotesque intimacy.
He's watching Truman naked,
creating this perverse parallel between his own vulnerability and Truman's total lifelong exposure. He's experiencing intimacy through violation. They've transformed a person into a text to be read and analyzed and bet on.
It's pure spectacle.
They own Truman merchandise, pillows with his face on them. They organize their lives around his. It's parasocial interaction taken to a pathological extreme.
And this is the point where we have to turn the camera on the listeners. We have to discuss how the audience in the movie, and by extension, us watching the movie, are the real monsters. Because we enjoy watching a man trapped in a zoo. We, by watching, become complicit.
That's it exactly. We pay money, we invest our time, we consume the raw suffering, and we are therefore underwriting this comprehensive act of abuse. We watch, we are entertained, and Christof's power comes directly from our hunger.
And that hunger, that's what created the economic structure of Sea Haven.
Shoshana Zuboff's framework of surveillance capitalism explains it perfectly. Truman is the ultimate prototype for modern data harvesting. He is not the customer of the show.
He is the product.
He is the product. His entire life is claimed as free, raw material. Every decision, every fear is translated into valuable behavioral data.
His authentic emotions, his unscripted choices, that's the behavioral surplus that gets packaged and sold to advertisers through product placement.
Which is why the show is the commercial. And it brings us right back to the cocoa scene. That's not just psychological abuse, it's an economic instruction manual. A moment of peak personal distress is immediately transformed into a revenue-generating event. Capital takes absolute precedence over human emotion.
Meryl's job is to deliver the ROI from a cocoa, even if it costs Truman his sanity.
And Christof's goal is what Zuboff calls instrumentarian power. He doesn't want Truman dead. That would destroy the product. He wants him molded into a predictable, stable consumer. He needs certainty to guarantee the advertiser's money.
So Truman's escape isn't just a moral victory. It's a market crash for the studio.
He is a corporate asset attempting to delist himself from the stock exchange of human souls. He's rebelling against the commodification of his own existence.
But why does the audience keep watching? Why do they participate in this slow-motion destruction?
I think they watch for a sense of shared reality in an already atomized society. The viewers in the bar are bonded by their collective surveillance of Truman. But that connection is hollow. It's purely performative.
They're alone together, trapped in their own little boxes, connected only by the electronic transmission of another man's life being sold for parts. The film suggests their real world is just as artificial as Sea Haven.
They're the zombies of the media age, consuming the spectacle because their own reality is insufficient.
And that final, chilling scene confirms the utter disposability of his suffering. After decades, when Truman finally steps through that door and the feed cuts to static, what is the first reaction from the security guards?
One of them just asks, what else is on?
And changes the channel. That moment is the ethical death of the entire audience.
30 years of human life consumed, and the moment the spectacle ends, all empathy evaporates. It's the ultimate consumer mindset. The product is used up, so you discard it and reach for the next distraction.
And that even goes for the nice viewers, the ones rooting for him. They're hypocrites. Their desire for his liberation is just another plot point they want to consume. It's an early warning of modern selectivism. Consume the suffering, feel a pang of performative empathy, and then scroll on.
The audience is the shadow of the film. Without their hunger, Christof has no power at all.
And that brings us to the most terrifying layer of this whole thing, a part that transforms this movie from dystopian fiction into a chilling documentary about how we live right now.
When it came out in 1998, it was a warning about reality TV. We all thought, how terrible for Truman.
But it was a prophecy of our entire social existence. The report calls it the modern inversion.
This is the realization that just stops you cold.
In 1998, Truman Burbank desperately wanted to get out of the dome. He risked his life for freedom. Today, with TikTok, Instagram, Twitch, everyone is desperately trying to engineer their lives to get ein.
The dynamic has completely inverted. We are no longer unwilling victims fighting for privacy. We're willing volunteers clamoring for exposure. We carry the tracking devices in our pockets that Truman tried to escape.
We build the sets, we curate the backgrounds, the lighting, and we broadcast our lives for that dopamine hit of ratings and likes.
It's main character syndrome weaponized. Our lives have become perpetual content streams. We're building our own personal reality shows, and we're paying for the production costs.
And the real terror is, we've internalized the camera so much that we're afraid no one is filming us. An experience isn't real anymore unless it's recorded and shared, validated by an audience.
The reality gap between genuine experience and mediated presentation has been completely colonized by performance.
Let's go back to Foucault. His ultimate point about the panopticon was that the inmate would internalize the guard's gaze and start policing themselves. In the digital age, we don't need a Christof.
Because every user is their own Christof.
We internalize the gaze of the imagined big other, the algorithm, our followers.
We become our own script editors. We edit our lives with pathological precision, suppressing the ugly parts to present a sanitized highlight reel that perfectly mirrors Sea Haven's artificial reality.
It's pathological impression management, and it leads to that same state of dissociation Truman felt, a feeling that you're constantly performing your life, not living it.
The Truman Show delusion has gone from being a rare psychotic break to a cultural norm. We all act as if we're being watched because, effectively, we are.
And every influencer post, every sponsored story, it's the new Coco scene.
It is the seamless, accepted, and voluntary blend of intimacy and commerce. Friendship is sponsored. Marriage is content. The self is fully happily commodified. We have all become Meryl Burbank, interrupting our own lives to sell Mococo to our followers.
We're the product, the producer, and the consumer all at once.
The digital panopticon is so much more effective than Christof's dome. It doesn't need physical walls. The barriers now are algorithmic.
The filter bubbles.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The algorithm is the new Demiurge, curating our reality,
Yeah.
creating personalized Sea Havens for each user, a prison tailored to your exact preferences.
It gives us comfort, but it denies us gnosis, that difficult knowledge outside the painted sky.
And if you try to leave this digital dome, if you delete the apps, you face the social death of disconnection. That isolation feels as terrifying today as Truman facing that storm.
Which brings us to the core terror of it all. The central delusion of the film is no longer a delusion. The paranoid belief that you are being watched, monitored, and manipulated by unseen forces
Is now a factual description of life under surveillance capitalism. Our location, our conversations, our preferences, all tracked by corporations that rival Christof's power. The film's paranoid style has become our default mode of existence.
So, after all of this, the psychological gaslighting, the theological tyranny, the complicit audience, the terrifying prophecy, what is the final, inescapable truth of The Truman Show?
The film wasn't a warning. It was a prophecy of our voluntary imprisonment. We have embraced the spectacle, internalized the guard, and happily commodified our own souls for the illusion of connection. The final, horrifying realization is this. We are all Truman now, but we built the cameras ourselves.
That is the tragedy of The Truman Show. We've looked at the psychological annihilation by Meryl and Marlon, the spiritual tyranny of Christof, and the ethical crime committed by us, the audience.
But the final piece of cynicism is in the escape itself. The report points out that Truman's escape in 1998 just leads him to a world already saturated by media. He's now the most famous man on Earth. The real world he enters is just a larger, messier dome where he will still be the subject of surveillance and consumption.
The system absorbs all rebellion and turns it into content.
Instantly.
And yet, that exit door remains the ultimate symbol. A black rectangle cut into a painted blue horizon. It offers nothing but the terrifying unknown, the unscripted chaos of reality. Truman rejected perfect, controlled comfort for that darkness.
And the audience, once the feed cut to static, immediately changed the channel. 30 years of a human life, gone.
Yeah.
Disposable, instantly replaced.
As the screen faded, we're left with this reflection. We are still in the dome, and we are still watching, but now we're filming ourselves. So the question for you, the listener, is this. In a world where performance is currency, where likes are validation, and where authenticity is a market inefficiency, what is the true cost of your unscripted self? And do you still have the desire, that divine spark, to find your own terrifying exit door?